Gonna talk. Okay, good morning. This is our 36th session of Wandering Through the Big Book. It is Sunday, November 7th of 2021, and the title of this session is Primary Purpose, the Enneagram, and Fear. So we're going to start with our opening words, and we've got some readers ready, and you can unmute whenever you want. So I'll read this first part. Opening words. Excuse me. Welcome to this session of Wandering Through the Big Book. This is not a meeting of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. There is no group conscience, no seventh tradition, no requirement for membership. Everyone is welcome. Our primary purpose is taking an in-depth look at the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, in order to deepen and strengthen our own recovery, to try to help others to do the same, and to try to become trusted servants of our fellowship. We are seeking conscious contact by trusting God, cleaning house, and helping others, and we're trying to improve that conscious contact by practicing steps 10, 11, and 12 every day, and applying the spiritual principles we are learning to the details of our ordinary day-to-day lives. We will begin this gathering with a moment of silence to reflect on why we are here. So here are some readings adapted from the Big Book. Let's see, the first one is Christina, number 1. Oh, you were gone when I when I said yes for you.
Yes, no, that's fine. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. 1, I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through and through. Perhaps you come to scoff, you will remain to pray. Page 0, right before page 1.
Thank you, Christina. And Buck, number 2.
No attitude of holier than thou, no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are the conditions we have found most effective, page 18, and be quick to see where religious people are right, page 87.
And Jason, number 3.
Morning, I'm Jason. If you are as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe you have but 2 alternatives. One is to go on to the bitter end, blotting out your consciousness, how miserable you really are, page 25. And the other, to ask our Creator each morning in meditation to show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love, page 83.
Thank you, Jason. And Michelle, number 4.
Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will for us into all of our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. This is the proper use of the will, page 85.
Thanks, Michelle. And John, number 5.
Just to the extent that I humbly rely on God and do as I think God would have me do, will I be enabled to experience spiritual serenity right in the midst of the human calamity, page 68. Head in the clouds and feet firmly on the ground, page 130.
Okay, thanks, everybody. And let's see, I'm gonna mute everybody. And here we go. So we're calling this Primary Purpose, the Enneagram, and Fear. And so one of the many gifts of studying this book and feeling part of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous for me is that I understand the importance of getting much clearer about my primary purpose. And I find that when I am clear about my primary purpose in whatever situation I'm in, everything just plain goes better. I make decisions much more easily. I don't experience the same kind of self-doubt that I normally do. And it's just a great gift. And the relation to the Enneagram is that until understanding something about my human personality, I was living to a primary purpose that I did not understand. In other words, and I'm talking about me, and this may not work for you, but on the Enneagram, I'm type 1, and it's called the perfectionist. And what I discovered is that, of course, you presume that everybody else is living the same way you are. And I can remember from an early time, you know, I'm taking this deal life pretty seriously, and I don't think you are. And I would experience resentment toward people that weren't taking it as seriously as I was. And I'm the kind that's gonna say, you obviously didn't do your homework. You know, you obviously didn't pay attention to the assignment and do anything. And I had this presumption that, isn't everybody doing? Isn't that everybody's way? And what I've learned through the Enneagram is that my need, we're going to run through them all, but I'm just trying to make a couple of points here. My need is to be right. And I've gone from assuming that everybody's trying to be right to understanding that my need to be right is really running from the fear of feeling wrong. I mean, it's just I'm telling myself I'm trying to be right, but the truth is I'm trying hard not to be wrong because I don't like feeling wrong. And what I'm sure of today that I would never have known before doing a fear inventory with a sponsor is that I'm never afraid of what I tell you I'm afraid of. I tell you I'm afraid of whatever, missing my connection in an airport. That's not what I'm afraid of. What I'm afraid of is how I react when all of a sudden I realize that I'm going to miss my connection. And I go into a panic. I go into this irrational, unjustifiable panic that, and I start imagining all kinds of things. And usually the conclusion is I'm going to die a miserable death within 15 minutes. And I'm not ready for that. And so I'm just trying to make the point that the Enneagram, well, and this is important. This is my interpretation of this thing. You can find lots of different interpretations of this teaching. It's an ancient Sufi teaching. It goes back several hundred years, as far as I know. And it was an oral tradition. It wasn't published. It's only recent, in the last 100 years, has been published. And where it really speaks to me is when it supposes, I'm not sure supposes is the right word, but 9 different needs that are really based on 9 different fears. And the action of the person is trying to overcome, is a strategy to handle the fear. So if I'm afraid of how I feel when I feel wrong for whatever reason, my strategy is try to control everything. So what I'm afraid of can't possibly happen. And then I don't have to experience my reaction to it. And I think that's super, except that it doesn't work. But we'll run through them eventually, but I just want to get back to, so what I'm saying is, I feel like through the grace and the power of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous and the book that and the things that we do based on the book, I have a different primary purpose today. My primary purpose is not to handle my fear. And this primary purpose has only come to me clearly recently as a result of reading a bunch of 600-year-old literature. And the one I'm on right now is St. Ignatius. And he starts his whole deal off with, your primary purpose is to love, honor, serve your creator, and thereby grow along spiritual lines and do whatever it is that your creator brought you on earth to do, to learn and grow as a spiritual being having a human experience. And I love it. I love it because honor is I love being able to distinguish the mental world, the physical world, the mental world, and the spiritual world. That it's all one thing, of course, but they are different aspects of our experience. And I had a lot of lights go on the first time I heard an AA guy talk about the physical aspects of our disease, the mental aspects of our disease, and the spiritual aspects of our disease, and went through, how do I know I have this aspect? What am I supposed, how do I treat it? And what are the promises of treatment so I can make a decision whether or not I'm going to treat my disease? And you've heard all this stuff. The physical aspect is that I react to alcohol differently than maybe 80% of the human population. I don't know. The natural reaction to alcohol is to stop, is to drink a couple, get comfortable, and stop. The body says, stop, you're hurting me. But if you're an alcoholic, the body doesn't say stop. It says, I want more, and I will do anything to get more. So the treatment is, I can't take the first drink. Which sounds easier than it is, because it's then we get into the mental part, and the promises of treatment are no hangovers, no blackouts, no physical material trouble. You get to the mental part, and I like to call it the strange mental blank spot, because I'm like Fred. Fred's the one that says that at the end of More About Alcoholism. And it's my inability to connect the first drink with the hangover that's coming the next morning. I just couldn't do it. Strange mental blank spot. How do I know I have a strange mental blank spot? Because I got burned by alcohol over and over again. And the book calls it, it's on page 24, right underneath its description of this mental condition, the failure of the hot stove defense. I needed relief so bad that I had to drink in spite of overwhelming evidence that I could not drink safely. And the treatment for that, the treatment for the mental part, is steps 4 through 9. And we're still, this is our 4th session on fear, where it's taken 37 weeks to get through fear. And we're not really through it. So the treatment is steps 4 through 9, the mental work that we do with the sponsor, the writing involved, the self-examination, the self-disclosure, the itemization of character defects, the praying for removal of character defects and asking for redirection, and ultimately the making of amends. And of course, we're not there yet. We're back in fear, but that's how we clean house. And the reason for cleaning house is so that we can be more receptive to this spiritual power that's way greater than the body or the mind. And most of us have a really hard time, especially when we're stuck in our heads or stuck in our bodies, or the traps that are stuck in our human experience, we are not open to receiving the guidance and the power and the love from the spiritual dimension, which we already are. The book promises it's deep down inside of each and every one of us. And the only problem is we have covered over our awareness of our spiritual truth. We've covered it over with pomp, calamity, and worship of other things. The writing of this book is just plain brilliant. You know, in the few phrases, he captures the pomp, you know, me making a big deal out of me and everything. Calamity, in my focus on what's going wrong in my life, which perfectionists are very, very good at. And worship of other things. I turn my attention to something else that I think is going to solve my fear problem. Okay, so I'm getting lost. Primary purpose. So what I'm hoping to do today is to talk about the primary purpose of the human being in its effort to handle its fear, that we wind up getting trapped in. And the undoing of fear is a major big deal. In fact, when we move from the mental aspect of the disease to the spiritual aspect of the disease, and if you ask that, this is personal, may not work for you. I know I've experienced the phenomenon of craving, so I know I've got the allergy. I know I've experienced the failure of the hot stove defense, so I know I've got this strange mental blank spot. Well, for me, the evidence that I have a spiritual malady is fear. That's what tells me that I have a spiritual malady, that I'm unable to trust and rely on God. I don't have a working experience with God. And what the book says on page 68, which has become a centerpiece for me in terms of the teaching that's in this book, is that we put our fears down on paper and we ask ourselves, why do we have these fears? And what's he say? Whoa, you mean that's why I fear? Because I can't handle my human life with my human body and my human brain? That is that on some level, I realize the inadequacy, my lack of power to handle my human experience based on reliance on my body and my mind. You know, I'm almost said confused instead of convinced. I'm convinced that my human self, as it shows up in something like the enneagram, it has two objectives. One is its own survival, its own physical survival. And fear is a wonderful technique for keeping me alive. When I feel threatened in any kind of way, it's fear that makes me move, makes me act. So physical survival is where my fear starts. And then my mind, all it wants is to feel good. It wants to do whatever it thinks it needs to do to feel good. And the real bottoming out for me was realizing I had tried in every way to satisfy my mind and live a good life. And I was still miserable. I mean, you're really screwed when that, and my only, I love the reading, you know, we only get two choices. Going on to the bitter end, trying to blot out of our mind how miserable we are, you know. which means keep drinking or keep doing whatever it is that we do to keep away from God, or accept spiritual help, or become willing to grow along spiritual lines, or do the house cleaning so that we can become more sensitive to this other source other than the body and the mind to handle our lives, to go to for guidance and strength. And the book keeps promising, and we read one of those, that just to the extent that I open myself up to my spiritual nature and rely on it to and I do as it would have me do, I will experience serenity right in the face of the calamity. I can experience a calamity of whatever sort and get to a place inside that is not experiencing fear. And that's because that spiritual part knows it was created by a loving God, and it is sustained by that loving God, and it's not going to die when the body and the mind dies. St. Ignatius goes on to say, so it doesn't matter if you have a good life or a bad life, a healthy life or an unhealthy life, a rich life or a poor life, it doesn't matter, because that's not the point. The point is being willing to grow along spiritual lines and getting somewhere. But you remember the car salesman, Jim, suddenly the thought crosses my mind, if I just put whiskey in the milk, I'm going to be okay. And then he says, I vaguely sensed I wasn't being any too smart. That's conscious contact. That's the spiritual nature coming through and saying, not a good idea, Jimmy. Not a good idea. We're headed right back to the asylum. You do that. So handling fear, I think, is a major part of this work. And furthermore, I believe that the things that we inventory, both resentment and remorse, are expressions of fear. It was a great day when I got into the fourth column around resentment and was able to make the connection between fear and anger. I could feel anger, and I loved anger because I had no self-doubt when I was angry. I knew I was right, which is what makes me feel safe. And I had no idea that it was fear that was powering the anger. And the same thing's true with remorse. That preemptive strike against God is causing our own self-suffering to say, God, you can leave me alone. I'm making myself feel bad enough. You don't need to add anything here. I'm taking care of it. But they're both fear, resentment and remorse. So, okay, gosh, the time goes so fast. Just one more thing. This comes from A Course in Miracles, and it's a very wordy, complex 1,300 pages, but it is absolutely brilliant, and it says some things, and it has these lessons. It has a workbook, and in the workbook there are 365 lessons, and each lesson has a title and it has something for you to do. And it's really about mind training and then trying to open yourself up to spiritual power. And there's one lesson that is repeated 3 times. And that lesson is, I am as God created me. And I've been aware of this for a long time, but I've never felt the peace that comes from feeling that. You know, the fastest way for me to get closer to humility is to say something like the 7-step prayer that starts with my Creator, and the 3rd step prayer. So we said to our Maker as we understand our Maker. The idea that I'm a created being, because my ego suffers in this illusion that I've created myself and therefore I get to do what I want. That's been my basic take on life since I was 7 or 8 years old. I've got to self-rely. I've got to figure out what I think a good life is. And then I got to go put the pieces together so I can experience a good life. And it just never worked. And I had to drink because I couldn't handle the fact that it didn't work. And drinking temporarily made me feel a lot better. I'm losing my way here. So I am as God created me. I mean, it's all of a sudden, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. I mean, that's huge. It's huge. It's saying, I'm going to ignore my ego and I'm going to try to be open to what you want me to do. Well, the connection to the enneagram is that this is 9 different dynamics in which the ego shows up, where it forms these, you know, I know that a major part of this work that we do is overcoming the power of habit of my own opinions. You know, the real problem is I believe my own thinking. And it's somewhere in there. I'm blanking on the page. I've only got 2 choices: be the intelligent agent of my Creator, or believe my own thinking. It's on page 49. We agnostics. Yeah, thank you. So the enneagram is going to be helpful in terms of understanding how I think, what my habit patterns are, what my opinions are. And just to throw in one more thing from A Course in Miracles, it says, you will identify with what you think makes you safe. So the challenge for me is to switch my identification from my body and my mind, which my mind tells me, I'm going to make you safe. Rely on me, I'll keep you safe. I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to head any trouble off at the pass. And trust me, rely on me. And that's why having that fail has been devastating for me. So this is shifting from relying on the body and the mind to shifting to the spirit. And that's why in this Sufi teaching, they call it, this is a teaching of the false self. Now, I prefer the human self. This is the human self with which you are identified, as opposed to the spiritual self, which has a whole different agenda. My body and my mind, survival, gratification. That's what I want. My spiritual soul, I don't know what that is. I think the primary purpose of step 11 is to ask my Creator, what is my primary purpose? Why am I here? What do you want me to do? That I seek through prayer and meditation, and then I carry out in step 12. Okay, I got to get to the enneagram or we're never going to. Okay, so I suggested that you print out these 2 pages from the study guide. And I just want to say, as we move through the steps, once we get to step 5, there's a lot more stuff we're going to be talking about that comes out of this study guide. So I don't know what, nobody's ever asked any questions about it, but it'll come in a PDF, and if you can print it and get a little notebook to keep it together, it's it's a lot easier to work through this stuff as we're going along, because there's stuff coming that's just not in the book itself. Okay, so I'm reading from 2 pages that are in the study guide for step 4, part 2, fear. And I'll just read this opening thing. The Enneagram and fear. The Enneagram is an ancient Sufi teaching that posits 9 different issues or fundamental fears that a human personality can fixate on. Well, that's important. That's where the habit patterns of my thinking get me in trouble. Fixate on. Identifying these fears can give us more understanding of ourselves and our reactions to life. In addition, we can come up with a much more specific and therefore more effective prayer for removal. What follows is a very limited view of the 9 types based on what may be their core fear. If you are interested, Google Enneagram, find lots of resources. It is a teaching of the false self. Exposing this false self can lead to liberation from the tyranny of the mind. That is so big for me, you know, realizing that I have lived most all of my life under the tyranny of my own thinking, over which I am powerless, because it's running on its own programming, and it's going to keep doing that programming until I have some kind of intervention. You know, AA is an intervention in my own thinking. Okay, let's see. Exposing the fault, liberation from the tyranny of the mind, as well as uncovering the fundamental idea of God within each one of us. So at the bottom of the 2nd page, it does a summary of the types. And so I'm going to just run through that. One of the things I love about the Enneagram is it distinguishes 3 centers that we can go at the world from. One is the head, one is the heart, and one is the gut. And generally that means conceptual, emotional, and action, physical action. So it's going to divide these 9 types into 3 that are called head types, 3 that are called heart types, and 3 that are called gut types. And the primary emotion, there is what they call the background of your attention. So it means what's in the background of my attention as I'm interacting with the world. And the head types, in the background of their attention, is how does this all fit together? They're trying to approach the calamity of the world with their mind and figure out, how does this all fit together? The head types are 5, 6, and 7. 5 is I'm blanking on its name. Let's see, but when I said here, the observer, the librarian, a cataloger of information. 6 is the doubting Thomas or the loyal trooper, and 7 is the optimist, the dilettante, the gourmet. So at any rate, those are the head types. How does this all fit together? And we'll get more specific about each of the types. The heart types, 2, 3, and 4. 2 is the giver, 3 is the performer, and 4 is the artist. The tragic romantic is another name that it's given. You can find all different kinds of names for these things, but they're in the background of their attention is not how does this all fit together. It's, do you like me? Do you like me? You know, you come into their presence, and what's going on in their mind is, do you like me? That's what they want, affirmation, to affection, whatever it is. And they each have 3 different ways of going at that, to do that. And then finally are the gut types, which are 8, 9, and 1. I forgot to say, the head types, the core emotion is fear. The heart types, the 2, 3, and 4, their core emotion is sadness, because they go into sadness if they feel you don't like them. And the 8, 9, and 1, the emotional thing is anger, which is interesting in terms of our step 4, because we inventory fear, sadness, if you call that remorse, and anger, which is resentment. So 8, 9, and 1, they don't really care how this all fits together, and they don't really care whether you like them or not. They want you to interact with them in some kind of way. They're into the relationship between two beings, and they each have their own strategy for handling that relationship. So, and I don't know if any of you, you can't see the enneagram itself, but it's really interesting. It starts with our serenity symbol. It's a circle, and inside the circle is a triangle that connects 9 and 3 and 6, exactly like our serenity symbol. And then it puts in the other types. They're called the core. 9 would be the core anger type. 6 is the core fear type. 3 is the core emotional, heart type, right? And so all the types are connected to 2 other points, but I don't have time to go into that, but it will predict who you will relate to, and where you go under pressure, and where you go when you're feeling okay about things. All right, now I got to get moving. So I'm back at looking at the perfectionist, the judge. This is type 1, the fear of feeling wrong, useless, stupid. That's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of hearing my mind say you are useless and stupid and you should have known better. You know, all of my fear will come down to that I'm really afraid of hearing this thing talk to me. Avoiding the fear necessitates trying very hard to get everything right, so that the internal accusation can't be made. The lie the mind acts on, a false promise, is that I will be serene when everything's perfect. And that's where I bottomed out, because I did everything. I got everything pretty perfect. And I was still just as miserable as before. Type 2, so the need is to be right. The fear is of feeling wrong. Number 2, the nurse, the helper. The need is to be needed. And the fear is of feeling unnecessary and therefore abandoned. They have a fear of abandonment that comes from not being important to other people. The fear is not being loved and or needed enough, so that 2s work very hard to be necessary in our lives by anticipating and focusing on other people's needs. They don't want, you ask them, what do you want to do? My wife's a 2, so I've gotten to know 2s pretty well. And by the way, relationships will usually wind up being next to each other, or they'll be connected by the lines. I mean, it's not always true, but so if I ask her, you know, would you like to go out to dinner tonight? Oh, I don't know, maybe. Where would you like to go? Where would you like to go? She'll just, you know, it's I'm not going to say it's annoying. It's not annoying, but never mind. Okay. 2s work very hard to be necessary in our lives by anticipating and focusing on other people's needs. They may be doubtful of God's eternal and infinite love unless they are extremely good. So where I want to be right, she wants to be good. And they are easily shamed. The false promise is, if I can get you to need me, I can be sure of your love and I'll be okay. Number 3, the winner achiever. You remember Billy Crystal doing Lorenzo Lamas on Saturday Night Live, you know, it's better to look good than to feel good. And believe me, you look marvelous. You know, it's like, this is the whole thing of image is what's important. You know, if I look good, I will get your love. The fear is looking bad, like a failure or a loser, and therefore not being affirmed and respected. They work hard to look good and win your admiration though they can feel empty inside. The false promise, oh, well, there it is. The false promise, it's better to look good than to feel good. Or if I can look good on the outside or to the neighbors, maybe I will feel better on the inside. Number 4, there are going to be a lot of people in AA going to relate to this one, the tragic romantic. They're much more focused on loss than they are on gain. And they're very creative people. And that's, I'm not saying that with, I have great respect for that. Their need is to be special. That terminal uniqueness is the way you hear it in AA. And the fear is of being ignored. That's a biggie for me. And 1 is connected to 4. 4 is where I go in retreat or in under pressure. You can do a lot of stuff with me. I don't care if you like me or not, but do not ignore me. I can be difficult when I'm feeling ignored. Okay, tragic romantic. The fear is of losing your attention. The strategy is to be special, never ordinary. They suffer from terminal uniqueness. Their tombstone from hell. You probably don't remember so-and-so. She was so ordinary and nondescript. You know, their fear would be nobody's going to show up for their funeral. These people work hard to stand out. The lie is, if I'm special enough, you will pay attention to me and I will be okay. We're getting there. Number 5, the observer librarian. Their fear is of being drained or dissipated by an unpredictable intrusion into their personal space. These are people that value privacy, and that privacy makes them feel safe. Let's see, they can seem distant and above it all. They work hard to keep a distance from their human emotions. The false promise is that predictability and privacy will make me safe. And their need is to know, and their fear is of not knowing. But what they're really trying to do is predict. They're hoping that their knowledge will help them predict what's going to happen, and that'll help them feel safe. Number 6, these are the hardest ones to see, and they show up in so many different ways. And one interpreter claims we are a 6 nation, that we're a fear-based nation. They do ascribe, you know, personality types to whole nations in some cases. Doubting Thomas, loyal trooper. 6s easily and instantly imagine the worst. They know the world cannot be trusted, but they do trust loyalty to a code or a cause, even a revolutionary one. They seek consensus. These types can be skeptical of authority. They hope to feel okay within the security of group thought. The lie, I am safe if you agree with me. So these people are great at talking and describing to you a situation and then asking, what do you think? You know, they want to know what the group think is. 7, this one's interesting, that the need is to feel unlimited, like there's lots of pleasant opportunity out there. And the fear is of deprival. Their song is going to be, don't fence me in. Don't limit me. Don't ask for a commitment. I don't know if I want to make a commitment. Something better might come along. You know, the joke is you ask them for dinner next week. Well, I'll next Friday, you know, well, can I get back to you on Thursday? Because they're wondering if a better opportunity will show up between now and then. The optimistic dilettante, the gourmet, safety lies in pleasant options and not commitments. 7s fear limitation or deprival of any kind, particularly fear having to experience any personal discomfort or anyone else's personal pain, and they can't get away. They generally engage best on a purely intellectual level and fear commitment because it's seen as a limitation of their freedom. Don't fence me in. There is a drive not to deny oneself anything. If I have pleasant options, I am safe. That would be the lie. Number 8, oh, this one yeah, the Godfather, the boss, the Avenger. vengeance is mine, saith the eight. And their theme, they don't care about what's right or what's good. They have an idea of fairness. It's not fair. It's not fair. And they're looking out for the little guy. And they are a great example of the fear is of helplessness and vulnerability. And generally they experience that early in their lives, and they take a vow, I am never, ever experiencing that again. So they go out and they acquire power in whatever way power shows up. And then they exert their power in what they feel is fair. They don't care what the group thinks. They don't care what the law is. They do it in their version of fair. Terrified by any form of helplessness or vulnerability, these types acquire great personal power and arrogantly exert it to control their turf. And to make sure that everything is fair in their eyes, they are especially protective of the helpless. You do not want to mess with these people. The lie, my power keeps me in control and therefore safe. And then finally, number 9. 9 is one of the hard ones to identify because 9s, they're very good at relating to everybody. And they have a hard time sometimes identifying themselves. But what my son, I believe, is a 9, although this is just like AA, you know, I can tell you what I think you are, but it doesn't matter. You're the one that has the ultimate decision. And usually there's a real negative feeling about this. It's like, oh no, I'm not a 1. I'm not a 1. When I first heard this thing, I was like, oh no, not that, you know, anywhere, not that, not a 1. Let me be a 4. Let me be a 7. I don't want to be a 1, you know. But so the mediator, the peacemaker, the need is to be at peace, and the fear is of any type of conflict. And if my son is a 9, it's because he experienced the conflict between me and his mother very early in his life. And he's a gifted athlete, and I've watched him play golf, and he's just so amazing. He can watch you and he can tell you what you're doing wrong and what you need to do to be more successful. And I don't even understand that he's, you know, he'll tell me you're doing this with your hip or whatever, and I don't know. But and when he plays golf, it's beautiful to watch until something goes wrong. And I've seen him break a golf club, and it's what, you know, where did that come from? Or take a swipe at the green with a club, and it's like, you know, this peaceful, together, focused, accomplished guy, and all of a sudden something sets him off, and you're seeing this anger emerge that surprises you. And it can be anger about anything, but that's his inner anger coming out. I gotta stop here. Let's see. Peace at any price mentality masks their deep fear of their own inner conflict, which bubbles up occasionally as pure anger. To avoid this anger, they narcotize and distract their minds with an inessential activity to avoid tasks that might arouse the inner tantrum. The lie is, if I can keep everybody out there calm, I can avoid my own inner anger. They tend to relate to all types. Okay, so there's so much more to this system. There's a whole thing about acting against the compulsion, doing that. There's a whole thing of trying to do the stuff you would never do. And one of the ways you can get people to identification is to give them a couple of behaviors and see what they're capable of doing. Like 1s, I don't want to be late. I get terrified. I don't want to be late to an AA meeting. So acting against the compulsion would be to be willing to be late. Well, who would have thought? So I'm going to stop because we're out of time, and I'm going to gong this gong, and at some point Buck is going to turn off the recording, and then we're going to have some open discussion. So thank you very much. I got next week. That would mean we're going to be now about sex. We'll be so I got to send you a PDF before the week is out, and hope to see you next week. And thank you, as always, for your attention. It's nice to be back. I missed these sessions. Okay, here we go with a gong, and Buck's gonna turn it off. Thank you.